Welcome back. In this devlog, we're going to look at all the changes that have been made to the game since the jam, and we're even going to talk about the path to publishing on Steam. First up, I did a small pass on the graphics. I noticed that the game did look a little dull before, so I turned up the color saturation just a little bit, made some changes to the lighting, and everything just looks a little bit brighter. The biggest difference I see in the graphics was adding ambient occlusion. Previously, the only way shadows could be created was by the overhead light pointing straight down. Ambient occlusion is a feature that adds shadows where objects get really close together, and it really helps sell the reality that those objects are touching. I added a new upgrade to the game called Magnetism. You can probably imagine, but this upgrade would pull boxes towards each other. It really helped for packing the weights together, but I had a lot of scenarios where I wanted to leave a gap and place the blocks apart from each other, and I had to fight the magnetism. Overall, I didn't think the benefits were worth it, so this idea got scrapped. I did a little bit of tuning on the weights, actually just to the big yellow blocks. Their weight came down from 1 to 0.6, and their point value got bumped up from 10 to 15. They were just way too troublesome before. The ring glowing effect was a big hit when people played during the jam. I got a lot of feedback praising that one element in particular. It wasn't done though. When there was just a little bit of tilt, I still found times where I couldn't tell which way the disc was leaning. So I brushed up on my shader graph skills and made it so that only the direction that the disc is tilting would change color. This immediately fixed all those situations, and I always knew which side had too much weight. I refactored the code behind the upgrade system. It won't change how the system behaves in game, but it made it much easier to add new upgrades if I wanted them. Of course, I feel a little silly doing that work and then deciding that the original 3 upgrades were all I'd ever want, but at the very least, it was good programming practice. I also added a refund button. I knew a save system was coming up, and I wanted people to be at least able to get back to playing fresh if they wanted to, and it also lets you redistribute points if you don't like the upgrades you bought. In fact, the very next thing I did was start that save system. I got it working using Unity's player prefs since I was only storing simple data types. I began with just your money earned and upgrades purchased. You could close the game, turn off your computer, and the next time you load it up, your money and upgrades will be there waiting for you. I had also seen some tutorials on smooth scene transitions. Most people seem to end a scene by fading to black, switch scenes, and then fade in from black. That would have worked to hide the abrupt scene change, but I had another idea I wanted to try. I created a third scene that actually drops a bunch of weights right in front of the camera while preloading the game scene. As soon as the weights completely obscure the screen, I do the scene change. The principle is the same, but I can have fully rendered objects as the blockers instead of just UI images. Next up, I added the options to the pause menu during gameplay. This is just a nice quality of life, rather than having to go back to the main menu to change options. I also added 2 new options for graphics. There's a toggle for VSync, and then a colorblind shift. This is one piece I'm overly proud of, because I hide the UI panels as you start sliding the colorblind shift around. Next, I decided to start trying some more interesting art in the background. I found a pretty good tutorial to make clouds. I'm really amazed at what shader graph can do, because this is just a simple flat plane, but the shader can distort each vertex up and down to make it bumpy. I started getting annoyed by the weights snapping back close to the camera when I was trying to drop them off the side. This happened because I made an invisible plane where you could place the weights, but it only went so far. Due to the perspective of the camera, this plane would have to be huge to take up the whole screen. Instead, I added some vertical walls that behave the same way. Now, no matter where you look, your mouse cursor will land on one of these boundaries if you're trying to get rid of a weight. I'm glad I made that change because the next feature introduced bombs. The idea being that you need to catch the bomb before it lands and toss it off the side. Once I got those working as intended, I needed to add some visuals. I found another good tutorial on YouTube for an explosion effect. I tweaked it a little to make the style match the rest of my art, and I find that sometimes I'll let a bomb land just so I can see the chaos. That probably means I should never run for president. This next change is one I'm really happy about. The scoring system got reworked so that each weight has a base point value, but that gets multiplied by however high up it lands. A 15-point yellow block landing 4 meters up will be worth 60 points. This really encourages players to at least try vertical stacking. It's certainly still difficult, but you can get some ridiculous scores if you go for it. This also prompted the need for floating text in the game world to help explain why you sometimes got different scores for a weight and why sometimes it goes down. I started tracking a few more stats, really just for fun. Maybe they can eventually become Steam achievements. These include the quickest grab you make on a block after it finishes spawning, the total grabs you make during a round, and the longest hold time on a block. I added 2 more background options just for some variety and things I thought could be fun. The first was just a bunch of triangles that spin at different speeds around a pivot point. This gives back way more artistic value than the effort it took to make it. The second is just a bunch of weights. I used the same trick as the cloud shader to make a bowl shape. This way the camera can't see the edges. The weights in the background were just as bright as the ones in play though, which I found pretty distracting. But here's one simple trick that game developers don't want you to know. I put a material on a sphere that renders it inside out with a dark color and some transparency. The camera is inside the sphere looking out, so everything appears a bit darker on the other side of it. During my testing, I found bombs appearing a little too often, and it was really painful to get more than one in a row. I reduced their spawn chance across the board, but I also added some code to prevent ever spawning 2 in a row. I finished up the save system by including all the custom options a player can choose. This included all the option settings, your name, and what background you were last using. I also finally got around to changing the leaderboard system to be based on IDs. Previously, it was based on the name you enter, so people were definitely going to type in the same name and have conflicts. Now, each device that launches the game will generate an invisible ID, and any future scores that come from that device will always be linked. Knowing that I eventually wanted to put this game on Steam, I needed to have a name. Even though it's just me developing it and a few friends tossing in ideas, I wanted to publish the game under a studio name rather than just my own. I landed on Output Enable Studio, since that ties back to my roots as a PLC programmer. I came up with a simple logo, and it made me unreasonably excited when the logo popped up while the game was launching. As I started investigating the steps that it takes to publishing on Steam, we found that there was already another game called Perfectly Balanced. Damn you, 1-to-1. Steam says it's fine for multiple games to have the same name, but I didn't want to cause any drama, so I renamed the game to Perfect Balance. It doesn't evoke images of Thanos anymore, but the title shouldn't be as important as the gameplay, right? The process to get a game on Steam isn't nearly as streamlined as I'd hope, but it's up there now. Steam policy says I have to wait a specified amount of time before actually releasing it, but you can wishlist it now if you want. It doesn't cost you anything, and you won't have to buy it when it comes out, but it'll at least give me an idea whether people will enjoy what I'm making. Finally, I started up a Discord server to represent my one-man studio. Feel free to jump in if you want to discuss this game, or future games we might make, or just game development in general. I hope to see you there.